and thank you everyone for bearing with us today. I know it's quite hot, but great to see so many of you in the room, and hi to everyone joining us online. The final session of today is all about, as Mel said, taking the leap, social investee stories of going through social investment. Different organisations, different experiences of social investment, and in today's session we'll delve into some of those key learnings, experiences, challenges, and everything else that kind of comes with it. But before we get started, I'll just invite my panel to introduce themselves. So if we go my right to left, Paul, I'll go to you first of all.
Thanks. Hi everyone, my name is Paul Myers. I'm co-founder and MD of Farm Urban, so we're a Liverpool-based social enterprise. Growing food in cities, delivering education outreach programs, and doing quite a bit of R&D around that as well.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Merrifield. I'm the founder and CEO of a predominantly black-led organisation called Support When It Matters. We're London-based. We're also known by Swim. And we primarily set out 6 years ago to focus on working with older black men who were struggling to access services, improve their health and well-being, and we've grown to do a whole lot more since. Thanks.
Hello, my name's Corrine Kilvington. I am the Artistic Director and founder of Theatre Space North East CIC, which is Sunderland's only professional producing theatre company. And we provide low or no cost access to professional performance, as well as education, supporting curriculum through artistic and creativity, and training, placement, bursary support offer to help build the economic area within the city, as well as improve the lives of those people with access to culture and creativity.
My name is Mary Cloake. I'm Chief Executive of Bluecoat, and even though it's quite late in the day, I would like to welcome everybody here to our building. So Bluecoat is the oldest arts centre in the UK, and one of the things about social investment, I suppose, is that it helps organisations reinvent themselves, and Bluecoat has reinvented itself so many times over the last 100 years. So I think it's very appropriate that the first event in our new event space, which is outside, this is the first conference that we've held in that space, is actually Social Investment Conference. So thank you so much for coming. So we have you can see the space we have here, and that we have a programme of arts, we have a gallery, we have a performance programme, we have a programme for adults with learning disabilities. Our learning disabled artists are very successful. Tess, one of our group, won the learning disabled, which won a prize for the Artist of the Year last year, and we also have an extensive children and families programme.
Thank you. And I know kind of when we spoke earlier on in the week, and I asked kind of, well, why social investment? You all had different reasons for looking at social investment, and it wasn't a case of, from the outset, it was the obvious option. So I just wanted to get a bit of, just your views on kind of what led you to social investment in the first place. And Mary, you've talked a little bit about kind of, I know at Bluecoat you've had several different rounds of social investment. Can you tell us a little bit more about why it seemed an option ahead of kind of grants or other forms of funding?
Yes, so we started off, I suppose you could divide Bluecoat's history into before social investment, BSI, and after social investment. So we started off because we needed a gap filled from a grant. So the Arts Council gave us a grant just around the COVID time to refurbish the reception area downstairs. Everyone's seen the reception area. It was very old and it wasn't fit for purpose. But they wouldn't fund the cafe bit. They said we'll fund all the bit of the reception area, we call it the hub. We'll give you money for artist commissions and new furniture, but it has to stop where the cafe starts. So that's a kind
the
of
Arts Council division line is a really interesting one.
So we approached, with the help of Matthew and a bit of breach funding, Matthew from Added Value, we approached First Arc, which is now Live Housing. Paul and Michael were very understanding. They understood straight away what the social value that we would bring from a cafe in that space, and that was really the start of the journey. So it was to fill a gap. And I've got a lot to say about the benefits of social investment subsequently, but I'll leave that to a later time in the panel.
I'll jump in. So we were awarded, Theatre Space was awarded a tender from the local council for just under £100,000, which we'd had to wait for a good 12 months to get the decision on. Got the offer letter saying, congratulations, you started 6 days ago, which was great. And then they dropped the little bombshell that it was going to be funded quarterly in arrears. So tiny little organisation of what was 2 of us at that point were being expected to bankroll the council's investment programme. Yay! So I spent a good long time phoning around every form of investment that I could possibly think of. Private lenders, public lenders, banks won't give you money if you're a CIC. I must have spoken to about 50 people before someone I know who works in the Business Improvement Centre just went, I should have a chat with Key Fund. I'm like, okay, that would have been great 10 days ago. And I did, and we did. And that's kind of where we came from. So we looked for that social investment to help us bridge that gap between what we knew we could deliver and had been commissioned to deliver and the cash flow that was preventing it from happening.
Thanks. So my honest experience of social investment was when I set up my CIC, I first of all hadn't heard of social investment. That wasn't something that came across my ears. I expected to go to the traditional commercial banks, put forward my proposition and hope they would understand it, only to find out that they didn't understand the structure of a CIC and the dividends breakup and the asset lock. And, whilst it all sounded warm and cosy to them, they went straight to the normal practical things. It doesn't fit our criteria. In fact, what is it? And it was when I came up against those initial hurdles that I spoke to somebody and somebody said, well, have you considered Charity Bank? And I'll use them. And I thought, well, charity and bank shouldn't be in the same sentence. How does that work? A charity and a bank? Right, so that was interesting. And being the kind of character that I am, which is what I call that element of unconscious competence, right? I think it was Richard Branson who had that statement that, get in and do it and then learn about it once you're in. Yeah. And that's absolutely been my philosophy from day one. So I just stepped in. I didn't really know anything about how it works. And then I had the really great first experience about what was different about social investment. And for me, the first thing that became clear to me is that it sounded like you had a bank manager. It sounded like you had somebody who was quite interested in what you're doing. It wasn't like, algorithms just saying your application's been declined, go and check your credit report or something like, you had somebody speaking to you. So that was my first experience that actually there is potential investment out there where they care about what you do. So I'll pause there and pass on.
Thanks, Peter. So we've had 2 rounds of social investment so far and are just gearing up for a 3rd round, and they've all been for very different things. So I think the first one, so we run a vertical farm, and we'd spent about 6 years kind of testing lots of different systems and figuring out what worked and what didn't. But we needed to sort of take some risk and actually spend what for us at the time was a big amount of money to buy a full vertical farm. And then we met Mike and Paula from First Arc, now Live Housing, who had this up to £150,000 investment opportunity, which sounded great, but I didn't really know how to go about doing a business case properly and do the finances. And then we got introduced to the Reach Fund, and then Matthew helped us put all that together, which I think was really, really, really key. And I would highly recommend anyone who's thinking about social investment to look at the Reach Fund. And then we put in an application, got the funding, and then we're able to buy the vertical farm, which was one of the probably 4 or 5 in the UK at that point. So really quite innovative stuff that was relatively risky, but they believed in us and backed us, and it's been functioning really successfully, delivering a lot of impact ever since. And then our second round was somewhere between crisis support, when the kind of traditional venture capital markets didn't support us, and we got let down by a few public sector contracts. So then that was a pool of a number of different social investors, Kindred, Key Fund, and Sumerian Foundation kind of all came in to support the business. And then that really allowed us to transition and really start generating significant revenue. And then now we're looking at a third round of social investment to develop a product and take a product to market.
Thank you. I'm keen to come back to some of those points around some of the challenges, but I guess when you're going for that first round of social investment, it's all kind of new, and Paul, you talked about kind of risk and those perceptions, but really keen to know, were there any perceptions you maybe had of social investment? I know kind of things like, we hear a lot of the time, people are quite scared of actually taking that leap into actually repayable finance, and what happens, you know, the worries that come kind of around that. And I know in one of the earlier panels, they talked quite a lot about some of the challenges, some of the things that happen when things go wrong. But kind of at that early stage, what were you sort of thinking when it was coming into social investment? Did you have any concerns around taking on repayable finance?
I think, can I just leap in? So if you're in the arts, one of the things you have is a huge aversion to debt, because you can back me up on that, because the business is so precarious. So if you know any actors, so say for example Cillian Murphy, if any young actors were in Piggy Blinders, he said to them all, if you get a few bob for this, buy a little studio apartment anywhere in the middle of nowhere, just buy it now, because you're never going to get a mortgage. And that kind of attitude is, you're never going to get a loan, just goes it's so ingrained in the arts that everyone involved has this fear, and it's just maybe a lack of literacy about borrowing, how to do it responsibly, how to forecast, how to build confidence so you can build it back. But we had a great board. So we had a social capital advocate on our board, Sally Ann Watkins, and Sally Ann was a single voice in the wilderness saying, we must do this. And so I think overcoming the fear of borrowing, especially in an arts organisation, I don't know how your board did it, but having people who actually know what they're doing with borrowing on the board is a big help.
Yeah, I mean, I was just really relieved to find somewhere that didn't need me to sign my property onto the loan, because I was literally at the point of going, we've got this massive opportunity, we have got the contract in our hands, and I cannot in good conscience sign it unless I know I can bankroll that first bit. So I found myself in this real catch-22 where repeatedly doors were just being slammed in my face despite having actual evidence that we could pay the loan back. So when I spoke to Brian at the Key Fund, that what he did was one go, I mean, we can definitely lend you it, but I think we're probably being a bit harsh. We can do a blended finance. So I went from then having had that conversation, because I was really honest with Brian about how uncomfortable I was about taking on that debt for just the reasons that have just been flagged, to going, well, actually, you're going to get 25, but you're only going to have to pay back 18. And all of a sudden, that feels significantly different. And then we're like, well, look, we'll tie it to 12 months, so it's tied to this contract, and so you know that's going to happen within this spend. And I was like, right, okay, well, that's guaranteed money coming in. It's guaranteed to cover what needs to go out. It works really well. Second time, because we've had 2 rounds of Key Fund, I found myself in a place where I've got contracts for this summer, next Christmas, 2 years down the line, but there was a bottleneck of people refusing to pay on time and not getting contracts or funding through in time, and then it coming in. And so we went back to Key Fund with a bigger ask this time and went, look, can you just stabilise our cash flow? So this time it was 60 that they again gave us, but it was 15 that was grant, and the rest was loan, and that then meant, and that was tied to 3 years. So again, it was tied into those contracts. So I knew along the way that we could mark that out. And then Brian just went, and if something goes a bit wobbly, just give us a bell and we'll straighten it out together, which is something I've never heard a bank manager say to me ever. And that was the kind of, it was that kind of letting the air out, that deflation of going, oh, okay, that works, that made all the difference.
And I have to really share that very similar experience. I think perhaps unlike the arts, the provisions that I was putting forward, I was really confident in the business model. I knew how we were going to generate income. I knew how we were going to service the debt. And my natural disposition is one of confidence. So I'm not one that's particularly shy. I believe I create the space I want to see, so long as it makes some economic sense. But what was perhaps most important in those very early days was that that kind of belligerence, you might say, and belief, right, and faith, right, had to be cloaked in some experience around what ifs, some scenario planning. Right, and what I found was my social investment manager at the time and through the Reach Fund, we got to look at some various options, some what ifs. And I realised then that actually there's no one here trying to trip you up. And I never heard, just like what you said, I never heard somebody say, if it goes Pete Tong, we'll look at it again. I thought that's a strange thing for somebody giving money out to say. What, if I trip up, you're not going to haul me in court or whatever it is. And so that provided that extra element, that extra layer of confidence. And, I suppose to some extent, maybe because I'm older and I've been around a bit longer, I kind of know, right? You have to try it first and then review it after. There's the risk of paralysis. If you try to map out everything from start to finish from your bedroom laptop and not actually go out and do it, then you're probably not you're always gonna find a reason why it isn't going to work. So I think there is something about your personality, your belief in your product, right, and risk. And that was my early experience. And I'll reverse what I think has happened as a result of being less risk averse. Is if I reverse engineer where we are now, we got our first investment in approximately 2022, right, which was for about £20,000. Today, we are a £5 million business, turnover annually. We're about to double that turnover in 18 months to about £10 million. That's come off 3 social investments. We've had no commercial investment, so all of our investment has come from social investors, right? But what they've done is they've helped us build the infrastructure based on that appetite of risk at the beginning. And now the business is a fully fledged business with all of the kind of protections you would expect any kind of commercial business to have. So the risk was well worth taking.
Yes, probably quite similar stories in that averse to debt. We'd grown the business organically for 5 years, kind of steady growth year on year, no debt, just 50% revenue from sales, 50% revenue from grants, and we were relatively comfortable. But then just knew we needed to, if we wanted to progress, we needed to take on this capital. And it's funny, you do the business plan and you write it and you kind of really believe, oh, this is all going to work. And none of it ever does. As in the way you intend it to work. So I've got a lot of naive optimism. So when I do something, I'm like, this is definitely going to work. And then I get a year in, I'm like, this is not working at all how we planned.
Oh, that feels familiar.
But then I've got enough grit to stick with it and make it work in a different way. And that's just been my experience of running a social enterprise for 12 years. And then the second time round, we were like, it's definitely going to work exactly like this. And these revenues look solid and we've been here before. Nothing like that. It was completely different, but a lot better. So I think it's that kind of, you've got to take the risk, but it can't just be, it's got to be considered and well considered, even if it ends up being completely wrong. You've got to have really gone through the exercise of thinking about the different scenarios and surrounding yourself with good people, and knowing that you will find a way no matter what. And I think having the right social investors alongside you who believe in you as a leader and you as a leadership team and think we can work together, that was really, really, really important.
And what do you think it was about the particular social investors that kind of gave you that confidence that they were the right partners?
Well, I think initially, Paula or Mike, they would just seemed like real people. Like we've said this on our call, like they came to see us, we had a conversation, they were nice people, like they weren't computer says no algorithms. And I think I just felt like, I think they believe in us and I trust them. And so we'll go on this journey together and just see what happens. And there were bumps in the road, especially kind of through COVID. And, they've obviously got the requirements they need to hit. So it's not just, oh yeah, do whatever. It is, you've got to make those payments unless there's a really good reason that you can't. And I think actually that was really good, that sort of financial discipline that repayable finance gives you. Because we were not blasé, but we were more blasé then, before social investments. But when I had to find that money every month to come out the bank, it kind of made you step it up a gear and sharpen the edge a bit more, which was good for us.
Yeah. And Corrine, obviously whenever you're a social enterprise, you're trying to kind of really stick to that mission of that delivering that impact. But whenever you take on social investment or when you're trading, you're also kind of thinking about that, the finances have to come through.
Yeah.
How do you balance that, and how do you avoid, I guess, mission drift?
You spend a lot of time going, ah. No, it does feel like that internally. I think what worked really well for us was that Uncle Brian, as I like to call him, he's saved in my phone as Uncle Brian at the Key Fund. He had a really good conversation with us before he asked us to fill out any forms. So we had a really good, hour-long chat with this bloke from just down the road who had just responded to a text message from a number that I'd been given at someone else. And it was that thing, I can't remember who said it earlier, about no wrong front door. And he kind of took us through that step by step. And that really helped us understand what we were asking as well. And it goes from, hello, I'm a crazy person running a theatre company in Sunderland by myself and I financially cannot figure out how to make this work, to here is an intelligent group of people who are fully versed in the bits of business that I have no interest in and no experience in. I started my theatre company by mistake. It's a great story, I'll tell it another time, but there was beer. And I'm a trained performer and director. I'm not trained finance manager. Spreadsheets give me nightmares, even when I colour them in prettily. So it's all well and good me going, I think I need this much money, but having that conversation with people for then Uncle Bride to go, that's what you need. That is what you need. And then he's taken it to an investment committee and they've gone, sounds perfectly sane to us, or sane enough for us to invest. Not only then is that okay, business works, but also I understand better now that my passion for selling my business is one of its biggest assets. And I think there is something in that confidence. And it's not a blind confidence because we're not stupid with it. We are just I know this is going to work because I will find every way I can to make it work. Not because the plan is perfect, but because I can pivot and pivot and pivot till I'm spinning like a ballerina. And I will keep doing that. And having the support of people with the other side of the business brain to go, you're not mad. This does actually make sense. And it makes enough sense for us who read, I think for my first Key Fund, my business plan was 4 pages. It's now 104 pages. Brian has told me to edit it. But just to have that support and that backwards and forwards, you've just missed this figure out here, or rather than you have failed to tick this tiny box on a tiny form at the bottom and therefore you can't have any money, was just, it was like having a big old boost of confidence. and a big old boost of not feeling lonely anymore, because can be really lonely, right? Especially when you take on staff and you're looking after their wages, and then you start to take on, for some reason, the assumed responsibility of their childhood's welfare, like their kids' welfare, and what happens if they can't get that sports kit, and you put all this pressure on yourself as an independent, like a founder particularly. So to have that level of support from the Key Fund to just go, nah, this works, you've got it.
I was just going to add, my experience is that mission creep is actually part and parcel. Yeah. It's absolutely part and parcel. There is absolutely no way are you going to grow impact, grow reach, grow your infrastructure without naturally being steered off, right, into where it feels like the priority is at that moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Quite often, your intuitive mission you never lose if you're truly designing and creating something that is born out of an intuition that's built in you. You'll soon know, and you'll feel your organisation doesn't feel like the organisation that you initially started off. You will then have the option, right, to either recalibrate, right, to turn inwards. That's what we've had to do, to repivot and position ourselves, review, painfully review
Honesty.
what has happened, and born out of that comes the experience. And that's when you tackle again much more closely to your aligned mission, because you've got that surrounding experience around you. So I would argue, don't be afraid.
Just be aware.
Yeah. Don't be afraid, though. And if you've got the right team around you, if you've picked the right people, they too should feel able to ask you the question, is this really what we set out to do? Is this what your statement on the website really means? Is this your values? This contract looks really appealing over there, but does it sit with your values? And initially, you might have cash flow issues which drag you across there, because you want to underpin the organisation, and then you learn, actually, I'll reposition myself next time. I won't go for that. So now we're at a position, having had that experience, where I can look at an opportunity and comfortably say, born out of experience, that's not for me.
Yeah, and I think that just to jump back on that, because we do a lot of co-creation, so a lot of our projects are designed from the outset with a group of people, usually self-selecting, that are interested in, will go, we kind of fancy doing a writing project. Does anybody fancy turning up for that? And then the people that turn up do. And if you are genuinely serving your social interests and you're serving your community, your mission may start to look different to what you thought it would, but that's not necessarily mission drift. And again, it's the beauty of social investment, because I can phone up Uncle Bry and say, we've got this opportunity, how do you think that fits into what you know of us from a business point of view? He's not just gone away, he's on the end of the phone for that, and he will very honestly go, you're mental, don't do it, walk away. And I'm like, that was what my gut was telling me, but my gut was telling me, not my brain, and I needed somebody else's brain to look at it. So that, again, another beautiful thing of social investment around mission drift is that those people get your mission, because that's what they're lending you money on the back of. That is your unsecured loan is secured on your understanding of your community and your work and that what you're doing. That's your security, and that's what they invest in.
And your core value.
Yeah.
Yes, I think there's two ways. I look at it, I absolutely agree with those two perspectives. I think there's two ways of looking at mission drift that I've come around to. The first is completely box it off. So one of the things we thought about at Bluecoat is there's a trading arm and an artistic arm, and put some walls between them, and then you can say to the trading people, your job is to make money, and then the arts people, your job is to fulfill the mission, make art and reach people. But there's another way, and this is why I really was struck by both your stories, because I think there's a way of enhancing the mission and looking at in a more holistic way, and I think that's where the innovation that social investment really drives innovation. I think that's one of the things that's totally underrated about it. If you have social investment, you have to invent new ways of doing things, and all the stories have been like that. And where I see and just a very simple example is, we've had this debate, and people here from Bluecoat will know about, oh gosh, well, we've got to have, we've got this lovely new space now, we've got to have loads of arts in there, we've got to have dance, drama, theatre, we could invite Corrine, we've got to have music, poetry, and we've got to kit it out like a theatre space. And then the other people were saying, no, yeah, that's fine, but where's the programme budget going to come for all that stuff? We've got to have events like this, conferences, weddings. But actually, what we're starting to think of now, why can't we have hybrid events where there is a band, there is a poet reading, there's some dance, and we have a bar and do the catering as well. So that idea of thinking about something new and different that's above and beyond what we originally set out to do, but it actually could be better, more holistic, the whole artistic field, Corrine, I don't know if you agree with this, is now becoming much more broadly social and cultural, and artistic outputs are less rarefied, they're more
unless you're the Arts Council.
Yeah. So I think innovation is a big thing on Mission Creep. Sorry.
Yeah. And Paul, you spoke a little bit about, I guess, things not turning out how you originally envisaged them, and especially when it came to kind of growth and new opportunities. How do you know kind of when it's the right opportunity? And can you tell us a bit about a time when things maybe didn't kind of work out the way you envisaged?
Yeah, I think so. In finance and business plans, everyone likes straight lines. Like it's all just going to be linear growth, or and my experience of like life and being a human being, it's not like that. It's all curves and rhythms. So we think about like the mission can wander, but as long as it's on a path to the right direction, then that's okay. So I can give an example of what for us was a huge opportunity. So we had this vision of this rooftop concept called the Urban Oasis. And we kind of actually developed it in response to a local authority who told us they had £4 million capital and they'd find £2.5 million revenue. And these have got a lot like extra zeros to the numbers we're used to dealing with. So we kind of were like, this is amazing. This is what we've always wanted to do. So it kind of felt in scope and within the mission. But then we needed to sort of tool up and then raise some investment to kind of prepare the business to do that. So we went to the private market and tried to raise £1 million to recruit the right staff, bring in the skill set and the different subcontractors that we need to deliver that vision on the strength of this, £6.5 million contract. And then along the way, another local authority came in and said, oh, this is a great idea. We've got £4 million. You do one for us. And we said, God, this is like amazing, of course. And then we started speaking to these asset managers, these huge buildings, and then we're in boardrooms in London, and we were like, this is it, we've made it. Like, the people are trying to give us all these millions of pounds to do things we've always wanted to do. I can remember thinking, how is it this easy? And then, so we went on this mission to raise the money, and I took my eye completely off the day-to-day business and just immersed myself in this private sector world, a venture capital world of pitching for money. And I enjoyed the process, to be honest. Like, I like that kind of stuff. But, we were just burning through cash, and the team were kind of getting on with things. And then every investor was like, we love it. As soon as you've got a signed contract from these local authorities, the money's yours. And I kept going back to the local authorities, how about that contract? A letter of intent, how about that? I was like, yeah, okay. The investors, yeah, no, we need the contract. And it took both of these local authorities a year to tell me, actually, we've not got that money anymore, and those things aren't going to happen. Meanwhile, I'd burned through all the cash that we had. My team was like, what's going on? I thought we were going for this thing, because I'd said, don't worry about the grants, we're all good. And it was the hardest year, not even professionally, just the hardest year of my life. I had to half the team, and like I'd nurtured and grown that team like a family, and brought them all in, half gone. And that's when this kind of second round of social investment came in. It was out of necessity to save the business. That's not necessarily what we told all the social investors. We painted a slightly different picture. But I think really they got it, and they saw what we've been trying to do, and they all came in and they put the money in because they believed in us. And then a year later, we doubled turnover. The staff was back up to where it was, and we're thriving as a result of that. But that was a really, really hard year. It kind of wasn't really mission drift because the vision of what we were trying to do was absolutely on point. It's just we got, I was going to say lied to, and I struggled at this because I don't really think those individuals and the local authorities lied to us. They just didn't have the conversations they should have at the times that they should have. Yeah. And we were a bit commercially immature to sort of really push for those answers, and we were, starry-eyed about the potential. So it was a challenging period, but we learnt a lot through the process.
Just conscious I could keep on asking questions, but I think it's probably a good time to go to the audience if anyone's got any questions they'd like to ask. There's a couple. I can kick off with one from online. How did investors agree to the risks listed in your due diligence and help you to no longer be afraid of taking up the funds? So I guess how comfortable were the investors with the risks that you kind of put forward, and encouraging you to kind of, I guess, come around to that mindset of also being able to take risk?
It's funny because when I think about the investor managers that we have had, I'm going to just say this really as it is. I was going to try and dress it up a bit. One of the things about the investor managers that we've had is they come and sit with you. They're dressed just like I'm dressed, right? They don't always understand risk themselves. They don't proclaim to be experts in the field. So what happens is there's a kind of shared lack of knowledge to some extent about risk. Obviously, there are some structural things that have to be put in place naturally. But actually, when I think back about the levels of risk I was persuasive around. I mean, I was quite persuasive. And because people believed in my ultimate goal, they kind of helped us manage the risk. So every risk I learned was manageable. There was no such thing. It's a bogeyman or person that I realize in your head when you think risk is something that stops you. What you've got to learn with your investment manager is how do you manage risk? Because everything has a solution. That's what I come to learn about risk. I won't move if I really identify every risk. So therefore, what risks are worth taking? Yeah. What risks can I go to bed with? And what ones will bring the business down? And it's just really a case of that, and an investment manager who also sees it in that way.
Yeah, and I think for us, obviously, that first one that we went in for, we had that contract, the legendary contract. It actually arrived. It was there. So the risk was much smaller on that first investment round with the key fund. But that meant that when we came to this second round and the ask was bigger and the guarantees weren't quite as solid, they'd already watched how we work through risk and how we manage certain situations and what happened when the wheels fell off and So then they had a kind of personal understanding. So I think that, that thing that we had in the last session of talking to them, going away, doing that work, coming back with a more solid idea and then being prepared for that idea to be rung through another ringer is the best way, because you understand the risk as you understand your business. They then understand the risk as they understand investment. And together, we all know there is a little bit of that risk that is completely invisible to everybody. And it balances out really well as a team.
Can I ask a question, please? Mm-hmm. Corrine, I didn't know you before today. I feel I know you very well now. But I do know everybody else on the panel. And I always find it incredibly interesting when we do these, because actually what comes out overwhelmingly is positive. And it's not because we've paid anybody or told them to say all this stuff, all right? But I'll be honest, I find myself in many places that are well less friendly, slightly more hostile. I'm very much challenged, and I don't mind that at all. Actually, I don't mind challenge because we're not perfect. We have not got everything right, and when I say we here, I'm doing a very wide, the whole social investment sector. I'm speaking for a wide range, but as we were the first wholesaler, we mucked up a lot along the way. So, you know, we were first. We had no blueprint. So, if I just push you a bit, yeah, on the bits that weren't so good, yeah, and what would be your, I don't know, piece of advice that you would give around the things that, the hard lessons or the things you found really uncomfortable on the way that you just share? Because I think it's really important. It's so brilliant that you're positive. In fact, I'm not going to do it now because I've written a few notes for the summary bit. But I don't want anybody to feel like, again, it's all positive. It's great to hear some positivity though. But yeah.
I've got something to say. So one of the things that I found a challenge was how much time it takes to get your case together. And I think we've all skated over that particular thing. So we did have support, we had reach funding, but to get the confidence that you can't, and that's one of the things I definitely would say to everybody, just you cannot rush that early stage when you're putting your proposal together, you're getting your vision clarified. The thing is also that I think when I started out on this particular journey, didn't have the confidence about forecasting. And on the positive side, I think what the process has taught me is that we actually all know our businesses very well. And it's great to have people who can help with accounting and forecasting and spreadsheets, but we need to be just a little bit more aware of the confidence we have in our own sector. But we do need to, there absolutely needs to be enough time. So the thing I didn't find great was trying to rush to meet a deadline. I think you just have to allow the time.
Yeah, we had a challenge with time, but we had the opposite because we had to have the contract signed by the end of the month to say that we were going to go with the work that technically had already started. And I literally sat in a car park, a supermarket car park, just off the A19, because Brian had rung me back far faster than I expected. And I had to BS my way through some of it. Like, I had to trust that I knew what was saying was right. I didn't have time to double guess myself. I didn't have time to double check anything. And to his credit, Brian took a lot of what I said and did the first bit of paperwork for me, which is why he's Uncle Brian. But Brian came back with hard questions that I wasn't prepared to answer because I hadn't had that prep time. And then I had to go away and I had to do them overnight. Or within, yeah, of course I can get that to you by the end of the day. I mean, I never didn't, but I didn't get a lot else done. So that work is important. Don't underestimate that time. Don't underestimate the time that it's going to take them to make a decision. I was super lucky. In both cases, Key Fund turned around the loan in less than 30 days, which was incredible. But I had to allow longer because I didn't know that. So have those conversations. I think, again, it goes back to what we were reflecting on earlier about that balance of power. And you're like, well, if you're going to give me the money I need, I'm not going to ask anything. I'm just going to take the money I need. And I really had to force myself into asking those questions. It's all right. When is it going to be? When will we find out? How long will it take to pay? What kind of reporting do you need? What form will that reporting take? And how long will we have for it? And I would suggest figuring out which of those questions or questions like that are important to you as part of that process. Because if you don't know to ask them, you don't know. And it's only afterwards that you go, oh, that was a thing you needed. And I kind of went, yeah, that's fine, that exists, I can get that policy to you. And now I've got to write it. So the more time you spend in that prep and the more aware of what you are needing and what form you need it in and what time scale, the easier it's going to be to manage that realistically. Rather than just going, yeah, you're going to give me money, I will do whatever you want. So be prepared not only to provide that information, but to clarify. Because if you don't clarify, that first reporting form is a real pain in the backside. And you're like, oh, you needed every single number of every single person. I'll go back and count the photographs that I've got then. Whereas actually what we needed was better recording and better evidencing. Yeah. So that was tricky for us because we just literally went, we do thing good. Yeah. You believe we do thing good? Yes. And not, we also have to prove that we do the good thing and that it works in the way that we say it does. So collect that evidence. Don't be afraid of the data. Just find a form that works for you and your organisation. And then, again, like we said before, the funders are really flexible in going, yeah, OK, we can take that. That will work.
So I think not all social investors are equal, is what I'd say. And I think, I'm not saying some are good and some are bad, but I'm saying they're different. So I think if you're thinking about social investment, don't be afraid to be bullish and say, how do you make finance decisions? Have you got an investment committee? What are your selection criteria? Because some social investors, in my experience, were a bit more of a bank. Mm-hmm. And if there was a guaranteed contract or guaranteed income, it was, easy. And others are a bit more relational who will say, that might work, but it also might not. But we look at your track record and you've made everything work so far, so we'll take a risk on you. And I think that was a little bit challenging for us because I didn't quite know who was who. But now I know the questions to ask. So I think, if you're speaking to the people who are going to make the decision, that's very different to those people then going and presenting to an external investment committee who are made up largely often of bankers and who will have a different perspective. So being very direct about who's making the decision, how those decisions made, and what kind of things they really will and really won't fund, and then you don't waste your time.
Yeah.
There's one thing that comes to mind for me about what I think is critical in your very early days, and that is what I call unconscious competence. Right? So the very name tells us we're talking about investment, we're talking about money. Right? And quite often that relationship between ambition, aspiration, social impact sits in one place and money sits over there. And very quickly, if you don't understand the numbers, but you've just been given this money, very quickly that money won't make sense to you anymore.
That's exactly what happened to me.
Right? So, and then what starts to happen is you start to realise the money's running out. The cost of the money is more than you thought it was because it's got the word social in it. It's money, it's hard-nosed money. And yes, there may be a grant element which might soften the blow, but it's commercial money, And so therefore what I realised needed to happen, if anything else didn't happen, the one thing that did need to happen is understand your numbers. Get good critical friends who understand finance. And if you don't understand it, get to know it before you get to know anything else, then you can delegate it. If you really want to stay in control of your growth and all the rest of it and your cash flow, is that I learned afterwards, it was all well and good getting a nice grant. Everybody, Reach Fund helped us get people in to help us write cash flows and that. The cash flows look beautiful. Nice colours, nice Excel spreadsheets. The figures at the bottom all show the nice profit. Here you go, investor. Then we get the money, and then, I suddenly start looking at month 4. And month 4, when I look at the bank statement, does not look like month 4. What didn't I understand?
Yeah.
So that's probably one of your greatest starting points, is understand that.
I'm glad that gives me comfort. My uncle Brian was Peter Hughes. He used to also work for Charity Bank, and I now look back at that first business plan. Like, none of that. Oh, it felt exactly like you, Paul. I was so confident that was how it was going to happen. None of it happened like that. Right. Okay. Olivia, have you got any other questions on that? Sorry, we've got one there. Is there anybody else in the audience? Because we need to. Nope. Okay.
Which is really good. We answered all their questions
I know.
without yammering.
I think there's one more on the iPad, maybe a quick one.
Thank you, Mel. Good afternoon. My name is Esther from the RSP project, CIC in Scotland. My question to you all is, let me just say to Paul, congratulations. How did you survive that? If it was me, I probably would just lock myself up somewhere and not wake up again. Just want to ask, from your experience, has there been a time when you just feel, what's the point in me trying to do this if nobody's believing it can be done?
Frequently. Frequently. Yeah, frequently. Every knockback, every grant refusal. I mean, I forgot that I was a CIC for the first while and tried to survive completely on grants, and then was like, oh no, hang on a second, the point was I can trade. And then I had to learn that trade wasn't a dirty word, and that profit wasn't a dirty word, and that I could use them properly. But still, every knockback, I'm like, really? We've got 15 years track record, we've got this, we've got that. So now every knockback feels slightly bigger because we've got that evidence base and we've done that work, and it's really difficult not to take it personally. And, you know, it's a fairly common sight in my house to find me sat on the kitchen floor having a cry with a dog. And then she goes to the fridge, she opens whatever's in the fridge, she has a little glass, and she gets on with it. It's just, very few people in this room will have started doing what they're doing to make $1 million, to have turnovers that you guys are talking about. You know, comparatively, I'm 10% of your size. And I'm at it 15 years. But I always manage to pick myself up because I'm not doing it for that. And if they can't see that, that's not their problem. I'm doing it for that kid over there, or that mum who brings her kid to the sensory play session, or that actor who can't get a professional credit in the city. And again, that founder's guilt, isn't it? You take on that personal responsibility, because if I'm not doing it, nobody else is going to do it. And there might well come a day where I go, well, sod it. I'm not doing it anymore. But right now, I am focused on the legacy of the last 15 years that I've put in. And that legacy is built on building with the rocks that people threw at me. So, yeah, okay, every refusal, every knockback is another rock, but they're building walls, so they're putting a roof on. Oh, thanks, guys.
There's just one other thing I was going to say to that point. Again, I think wisdom plays a part in this. So I'm of the view that we've now moved as a society away from this idea of failure. Right? I don't actually believe in failure. I think it's a prison we put ourselves in. We build it around us. Everything is an opportunity for experience. There really isn't failure. You know, I've met a wise older person who had been in the commercial world for all his life. And he says, I'm not really interested in working with people who haven't had at least 2 failures. And I took that in. Seriously, I'm 64 years of age, so I've been around a bit now, right? And I realise that these are all opportunities for learning. You know, and you know, it just really speaks to what you said. 100%, you'll pick yourself back up again. If it's genuine, if it's got a real calling, if there's a need, some door will open for you, is also what I've come to realise. Many may shut, there will always be a door open, always. You'll just have to put the foot soldier work in, right, to find that door, right, but there will be one.
Someone told me one time to always see failure as a revolving door. That I keep going, the door keeps me bring back to the same point. That if I don't get out of the revolving door, I can always go back to the starting point
And revolve again.
And come back.
There's an amazing piece of research, very quickly, sorry, I know we're tight on time, that was done by Leeds University and another couple called the Fail Space Project. And if failure is a real challenge for you personally, I am one of those people that could have 99 good reviews and would focus on the one negative. Fail Space is really good because what it does is it divides down the levels of failure. And when you plan a project, you go, absolute failure looks like this, absolute success looks like this, and there are 10 things in between. And you can then look at it and go, okay, so it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't necessarily a great success on our data collection, but it was an amazing success on the impact that it had for those children. So it's impossible then to look at anything as an abject failure. You just have to, and it's a free resource. You can print out the scales, the instructions, how to use it, but it will really help you frame. And again, that's really useful for a business plan. You know, it's really useful for getting that due diligence. This is what failure looks like to us, is a really useful thing to be able to say, because, you know, don't put your head in the sand is the message from the funders. So if you go, this is what failure looks like, this is what partial failure looks like, this is what moderate success looks like, you're not putting yourself in that box. You're not putting yourself in that binary yes or no. Yeah. And it's a really useful tool, so do go have a look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid of kind of that word failure and being able to kind of, I guess, reimagine success and what good looks like. And that journey is not going to be, you know, straightforward. It will, as you said, Paul, take kind of dips and turns, but you're kind of working towards that final mission. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's been really great to kind of hear your insights again. And yeah, please join me in saying a huge thank you to the panel today.
Thanks, guys.